ज्ञानार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं तं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तन्न विदुः सुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
Om Gurubhyo Namaha. We continue with chapter 3, Karma Yoga, and here is the essence of the verses 26 to 28, translation and commentary by Maharshi Ji. Na buddhi bedam janayet Ajnanam karma sanginam joshayet sarva karmani vidvan yuktaha samacharan. Prakruteh kriyamanani gunaihi karmani sarvasaha ahankara vimudhatma karta aham iti manyate. Tatvavittu mahabaho गुणकर्म विभागयोः गुणा गुणेषु वर्तन्त इति मत्वा न सज्जते. Here is the English translation. Let not the wise man create a division in the minds of the ignorant who are attached to action. Established in being, he should direct them to perform all actions, duly engaging in them himself. Again, Let not the wise man create a division in the minds of the ignorant who are attached to action. Established in being, he should direct them to perform all actions, duly engaging in them himself. Next verse. Actions are in every case performed by the gunas of nature. He whose mind is deluded by the sense of I holds I am the doer. Again, actions are in every case performed by the gunas of nature. He whose mind is deluded by the sense of I holds I am the doer. Next verse. But he who knows the truth about the divisions of the gunas and their actions, O mighty armed, knowing that it is the gunas which act upon the gunas, remains unattached. Now let's go back to verse 25 and review it. This is where we left off. Bhagavan is saying, as the unwise act out of their attachment to action, O Bharata, so should the wise act, but be without any attachment and desiring the welfare of the world. Again, as the unwise act out of their attachment to action, O Bharata, so should the wise act, but without any attachment, desiring the welfare of the world. So here Bhagavan is telling Arjuna that there is absolutely no difference between the action of an ignorant man and that of one who is enlightened. Because action is action, whether it is performed by the ignorant or the enlightened. The difference is found only in the result, and this is important. The difference is found only in the result. The ignorant man acts and benefits from the results of his actions, and because he is attached to these results, they make a deep impressions on him. Whereas the effects of the enlightened man's actions spread out in the world and everything benefits from them. The impression of the result passes him by, leaving him free from the bondage of action. Again, the impression of the result do not stick, leaving him free from the bondage of action, because he has realized the self as separate from activity and acts from the basis of eternal contentment. And finally, Bhagavan is saying, his actions are in response to the needs of the time, fulfill the demands of their surroundings, and the wise are tools in the hands of the divine and innocently carry out the divine plan. Their actions arise from their desire for the welfare of the world. Now let us go over the verse 26 again. Let not the wise man create a division in the minds of the ignorant who are attached to action. Established in being, he should direct them to perform all actions, duly engaging in them himself. So here Bhagavan is advising, let not the wise man create a division in the minds of the ignorant who are attached to action. Here it's important to understand the state of a realized man. So the state of a realized man is the result of many years of inner development founded on right values in life. This causes his life to flow naturally in right channels of conduct. Although his being is above the realms of right and wrong, his actions are quite naturally right actions. Now, in this verse, the wise man is advised to allow the ignorant man to do his duty. He is asked to refrain from telling him that the state of enlightenment is free from both good and evil, and that the whole field of relativity is just the play of the three gunas which do not belong to his being. It is very well known that all actions, every type of activity, is necessary for life in the world. There are so many different activities. There is the activity of the ego, activity of the intellect and mind, and activities of the body. And all activity, gross and subtle, in every field of life has its place in the scheme of one's evolution. And here Bhagavan is saying it is even more important that the wise man should not confuse the ignorant by telling him about the uninvolved nature of the self. The intellect of the man who is not realized is wholly involved with activity, and the realized should not create a division in such a man's mind. He should not talk to him of the separateness of the self from activity, otherwise the ignorant man may lose interest in practical life. And if this happens, he will never be able to gain self-realization. It is further important to understand that it is not the intellectual understanding of the separateness of the divine and of activity, but it is rather the experience of this state which brings a man enlightenment. And in order that one may gain this experience and become established in it, conscious activity both in the gross and subtle fields of life is necessary. So Bhagavan is telling the wise, teach transcendental meditation to the ignorant man so that he may engage himself in subtler phases of activity and thereby realize the transcendent being, the self, in its true nature as devoid of any activity. So teaching him the transcendental meditation, and having gained this realization, he should continue to act in daily life so that it may become firmly established in the very nature of his mind. And then set him an example by duly engaging in actions yourself. So again, it's important for the ignorant man to continue with his activities, but also introduce him to transcendental meditation so that he engages himself in the subtler phases of activity and then realizes the self. And when he realizes the self, then he automatically knows that the self is separate from activity. And he will further realize that being the self, its true nature is devoid of any activity. And once he has gained this realization, then he should be advised to continue to act in daily life so that the self is firmly established in the very nature of his mind. And it is all the more important that the wise set an example by duly engaging in actions himself. Again, it is important to understand that all activity at more subtle levels is the activity of the thought process. Again, the activity at subtle levels is the activity of the thought process. So during meditation, the process of experience becomes at every moment more and more refined, and eventually the mind transcends the finest level of activity. And here Bhagavan is implying that this finer activity also should not be ignored in the midst of the gross activity of thinking, speaking, and acting. It is important that the wise see that all activity, gross and subtle, is undertaken by every man in society in due proportion. Again, it is important for the wise to help the society by making sure that every person undertakes all activity, gross and subtle. The activity of daily life should be supplemented by morning and evening meditations. Bhagavan is giving a word of caution when he tells the wise, established in being, he should direct them to perform all actions, duly engaging in them himself. Here, all actions should not be taken to include wrong actions. Again, all actions should not be taken to include wrong actions. And what are the right actions? These have been discussed in verses 8 and 9. Again, as a reminder, Bhagavan says in verse number 8 that he should perform his allotted duties, and these are natural duties for which one is born, natural action in accordance with the laws of nature, action according to one's own dharma, action which is in line with the natural stream of evolution, action which is an innocent link between self-consciousness and cosmic consciousness, and action which serves as a way to achieve God consciousness, the fulfillment of life. And again here Bhagavan says that if one does not perform his allotted duties according to his nature, then there is the danger that he will be engaging in actions which lie outside the path of his own evolution. And here again Bhagavan says, meditation is the key to the performance of one's allotted duty, because it is a direct way to make glorious every aspect of life, for it transforms a life of bondage in the world into the divine life of eternal freedom in cosmic consciousness, where one experiences the self as separate from activity. And in verse number 9, Bhagavan further says that all actions should be done in the spirit of yajna and engage in action free from attachment, because accepting actions performed for yajna, this world is in bondage to action. So the aim of doing all actions in the spirit of yajna is to lead every soul to the state of perfection, the highest and most exalted state of existence, which is God consciousness. Bhagavan continues, Actions are in every case performed by the gunas of nature. He whose mind is deluded by the sense of I holds, I am the doer. In this verse, it is revealed that the doer of all actions is not the self and provides a graceful answer to the question which naturally presents itself. And what is this question? Through the practice of transcendental meditation, one begins to live in bliss consciousness and begins to feel self-contained. How can action which is always motivated by some desire be possible in the state of complete contentment? And the answer to this question is, actions are in every case performed by the gunas. As long as the self has not been experienced as separate from activity, the mind remains deluded about its own status and its relationship with activity. Associating itself with the nature of the gunas, it assumes the authorship of action, which actually belongs to the gunas. And this is how, through ignorance of his own self, man falls into the bondage of action. So here again, the man does not know that he is the self and that the activity is separate from the self, and he associates himself with the nature of the gunas and assumes the authorship of action, and he thinks he is the doer, but in fact it is the gunas who is the doer. And this is how, through ignorance of his own self, man falls into the bondage of action. Now let us take a look at these gunas. These are the sattva, rajas and the tamas. These are the three gunas of nature, which we call it as prakriti. And prakriti is the primal motive force, and it is the essential constituent of manifested creation. And this prakriti is at the basis of all activity. This gunas of the prakriti is at the basis of all activity. And this is what Bhagavan means when he says that all actions and all happenings in creation arise out of the three gunas and their permutations and combinations. Now let us see how these gunas interact. This is made clear by an example. It is a natural law that when a vacuum is created somewhere in the atmosphere, at once a flow begins from an area of greater pressure. Even while the flow starts from the area of greater pressure, the actual cause lies in the vacuum. It is the vacuum that creates the situation. So similarly, the currents of the three gunas flow in order to keep a balance among themselves. They continuously and continually flow from one field of existence to another, and in this way create and maintain various activities in a natural way. The entire phenomenal world is nothing but the interplay of these three gunas. Now, how do these gunas find an expression? So gunas find an expression, for instance, in the metabolic processes of the body, and on their basis feelings of hunger and thirst arise. The need for food and water is in the physiological sphere, but the ego feels I am hungry, I am thirsty. And this is how takes these actions upon itself. The gunas are responsible for all experience. They are the basis of all events and all activities. But again, the ego takes these upon itself and feels, I am acting, I am the doer, I am the thinker. It assumes the authorship of action, which actually belongs to the gunas. So this is how, through ignorance of his own self, man falls into the bondage of action. Bhagavan further continues, but he who knows the truth about the divisions of the gunas and their actions, O mighty armed, knowing that it is the gunas which act upon the gunas, remains unattached. So here in this verse, in contrast to the preceding verse, Bhagavan shows the state of the mind of a man who is realized, and at the same time provides insight into the process of realization through the knowledge of the three gunas. Now, this present verse speaks of action in terms of freedom through the knowledge of Samkhya, but as this knowledge gains completeness only through the process of direct experience, it is inclusive of the technique and philosophy of yoga. Try to understand this. Here we are talking about the action in terms of freedom through the knowledge of Samkhya. But just the knowledge is not enough. The completeness only comes through the process of direct experience. And that is why it is inclusive of the technique and philosophy of yoga. So here in this verse, Bhagavan brings together the philosophies of Sankhya and Yoga described separately in the second chapter, and initiates a principle of liberation from the bondage of karma resulting from the combined effect of the two teachings. So this bringing together of the two philosophies of Sankhya and Yoga becomes the basis of the Karma Yoga and the essentials for its fulfillment. And the whole purpose of this verse, even though it speaks in terms of the gunas, is to throw light on the state of fullness of life in absolute bliss consciousness, that is Jivan Mukti. Having understood the main aim and the goal, now let us try to understand the truth about the divisions of the gunas and their actions. There are these three gunas which constitute Prakriti. Now Prakriti is eightfold. And this eightfold Prakriti then gives rise to the 24 basic divisions in the field of gunas. Knowledge of these 24 divisions and their actions liberate man from the bondage of action by showing how both subjective and objective aspects of our life emanate from the gunas, and how the self is eternally uninvolved with anything in the manifested field of life. This is very important to understand, that this path of liberation from bondage, which is laid out, has the following significant features. Again, try to understand that this path of liberation from bondage, has the following significant features. Number 1, the knowledge has to be thorough and comprehensive. Bhagavan says, he who knows the truth. So this truth has to be thorough and comprehensive. Again, the truth in terms of the knowledge has to be thorough and comprehensive. Secondly, the knowledge has to be about the gunas, their divisions, and their actions. Number 3, the knowledge also has to be about the interplay of the gunas. It is very important to understand here that gunas are themselves the subject. They are also the object, and they are also the subject-object relationship. For example, as a subject, one is the doer, and as the object, the work or the activity that is done, and then the relationship between is the process of doing. And here the gunas constitute the entirety of phenomenal existence as the subject, object, and the subject-object relationship. So it is the gunas which act upon the gunas. In the previous verse, Bhagavan attributed the authorship of action to the three gunas. And now, in this verse, he says that one who knows the truth about the gunas and their actions remains unattached. And now here a question arises. Is intellectual understanding of the gunas sufficient to bring freedom? If intellectual understanding could fulfill the conditions of knowledge given above, then according to this verse, it could certainly make a man sufficiently unattached to become completely free. But in reality, it is doubtful if the truth about the three gunas and their interplay can be known only on the level of intellectual understanding and without directly comprehending the nature of the gunas at the subtlest level of creation. Again, the question is, will intellectual understanding of gunas bring freedom? Will the truth of completely knowing the nature of the gunas, will this truth be known without directly comprehending the nature of the gunas at the subtlest level of creation? Then a further question arises. What is the way to such direct comprehension? And here Bhagavan is saying the answer is simple. The gunas are the finest aspect of creation. Therefore, if a man could take his attention to the subtlest level of creation, it would be possible for him to know what the gunas are, what are their divisions, and all the details concerning their actions. And in fact, all this knowledge is gained during transcendental meditation when the mind is about to transcend the subtlest state of the object of attention. Bhagavan is saying that the scope of the teaching, be without the three gunas, is the way of knowing the truth at the subtlest level of creation. And when one is established in transcendental consciousness, here this is the state without the three gunas. The knower of reality knows by experience that the realm of action lies at the surface of his life and is separate from his real existence. And thus he comes to know the truth. And this knowing the truth does not mean only he knows the division of the gunas and their actions, but also he has realized the self as separate from activity. And this natural state of separation from action, gained through the practice of transcendental meditation, is the basis of his remaining unattached. And this is the most important thing, that when the state of being or pure consciousness is firmly established in the very nature of the mind, then one lives quite naturally the state of pure existence, separated from the field of activity. And this happens even while ego, intellect, mind and senses are engaged in action. So again, one's ego, intellect, mind and senses are engaged in action. But he naturally remains separate from the field of activity. One realizes that the field of activity remains in the province of the three gunas and is no longer intimately connected with one's existence. And this is how one naturally remains unattached in the midst of activity. And this state of knowledge, and what is this? It is knowing that it is the gunas which act upon the gunas, remains unattached. And this state of knowledge fills the whole field of one's understanding, the whole range of one's understanding. And this is because the gunas are the subject, they are the object, and are also the relationship of the subject and object. So in conclusion, Bhagavan again reminds that the purpose of this verse is to throw light on the state of fullness of life in absolute bliss consciousness, Jivan Mukti, although it is speaking about gunas. Here ends the essence of these verses 27, 28 and 29, Chapter 3, Karma Yoga, translation and commentary by Maharshi Ji. Now I will add a few words. Here we understand that we are all governed by our basic nature, attributes or gunas. The impressions and the patterns from the previous births, which we call as vasana, and the mind as these three gunas, determine what we are and what we do in this life, and also what will happen in the future births. All the desires are born out of this vasana, and they carry on with their own energy, wanting to fulfill these actions and reach the goals in the way they perceive and understand. So, we understand that these vasana or desires with which one took the body and mind will make this body and mind go through whatever activities it was made for. The wise person goes through all these activities knowing that the self is separate from the activity and that he is the self and he is not the doer. Here Bhagavan is saying that it is of utmost importance for the wise to remain as the self and continue to do the actions that are needed for the welfare of the world and others, and be able to guide the ignorant. The enlightened one knows that he is the self, and he recognizes these vasana and the gunas and actions as functioning apart from the self. So being the self alone, he remains detached and unaffected by the play of the vasana, gunas and these actions. He virtually becomes a witness, observing the different gunas functioning. The ignorant person has practically no insight into the distinctions between the inner self and the outer activities of the vasana and gunas, and so he remains fully involved and attached to the world. But if he learns TM and gains the knowledge of the subtleness or the subtle aspects of these actions, and also the knowledge of these gunas, then he starts identifying more with the self and also starts becoming more unattached to the world of vasanas and these gunas. And this is how he acquires more and more objectivity until he reaches the state of absolute perfection or the freedom. And so it is important that one who has the experience of these higher states of consciousness not upset the minds of the ignorant who are attached to action. Since they don't have the experiential knowledge, so naturally they have lower values of life. They may understand and even appreciate the value of this knowledge, but they cannot instantly implement them in their lives because of their power of their own vasanas, their inherent tendencies. It is important to understand that these vasanas of an individual take their own course and gradually evolve to higher development. So one cannot be changed overnight with this intellectual knowledge. So once vasana, the inherent tendencies and the samskaras determine the qualities of these activities, and this is where the division of the gunas comes. So if one has the sattvika guna, then these vasanas, these inherent tendencies, tend to be also more sattvic. They can be of kind and generous nature, and one can express kind and generous ideas, feelings and actions. And if one has rajoguna, then these vasanas also represent that guna, or they manifest their tendencies, thoughts and actions that are more rajasic. The desire to have more and more, the desire to accumulate more and more, and whereby there is more agitation and restlessness in life. In the same way, if an individual is in tamoguna, then naturally his vasanas also represent that, reflect that inertia, that indolence, laziness. Since we see all of these around us and we come across them in all walks of our life, so for a seeker, the most important thing is to first focus on yourself. You raise your own consciousness, you rise to perfection yourself, focus on your enlightenment, and continue doing the actions with this both intellectual and experiential knowledge that you are the self and you are separate from the activity, and set an example for people around you. Then help them learn TM, Transcendental Meditation, and guide them so that they understand the subtler aspects of themselves, of their actions, and of their gunas, and they rise more and more into the Sattva guna and also gain the higher states of consciousness. And this is how you are helping with the transformation of each individual. So this is the highest responsibility for every seeker, to rise yourself, in yourself, within yourself, and focus completely on enlightenment and help others on the path. So we will continue tomorrow. Jai Gurudev. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu.